It's a little over 7 in the morning. I'm already up picking tea. I'm in Huang Shan right now to get some Huang Shan Mao Feng. So what I'm in right now is actually, by the way, Huang Shan is my absolute favorite mountain. It's just so gorgeous, and I've been to some pretty, gorgeous places. This is one of the sight scenery locations. This is called Night Dragon Waterfall. Because it just rained yesterday, so you can see the water. The reason it's called Night Dragon Waterfall is because the waterfall actually drop night times, like there's night segments of the waterfall. The key here is it's pretty high. So in general, I was told I had to hike for like 40 minutes if I walk fast, over an hour if I'm slow. So today is April 8th. 今年8号对吧？哎，8号。And see some of the higher mountain Mao Feng is just being picked. What I want to say is basically the before April 4th day is, I wouldn't call it a myth, but it's only applying to tea of particular regions, and because those teas are historically famous, like Longjing, Biluochen, so people oftentimes get confused with the dates of other green teas. Mao Feng really just started picking recently, and if it's before Qingming, sometimes it can be too tender, or it's from the flatland. You can also see how foggy it is. It's 8 a.m. already, and it's still very, very foggy. Now let's have a closer view of the leaves, and I want to explain to you some of the kind of very geeky but important concepts in tea picking. So some people are very obsessed with the tea, whether you pick one bud of 2 leaves or one bud 1 leaves, but once you come to tea country, you realize that's never the standard. It's only just kind of like a rough guideline. What you want to pick is the tenderness of the tea. So for example, actually, Mao Feng, actually for most green tea, the standard picking historically has always been 1 bud and 2 leaves, because that's when the tea's flavor is the fullest and gets still very tender. So you can see these are small leaf varieties, obviously, and so we see a bud and 2 leaves, right? And it's very, very tender. You can see even the leaf is still folding backward. That's a sign of how tender it is, and also that it's very it has tons of nutrients. So this one, you see this leaf has already become a little distance to compare the other ones. So you want to pick here. So let's continue talking about the varieties of the teas, or the varietal of the teas. Remember in Yunnan I talk about the kind of 3 category of the tea varietals. Basically we kind of just roughly call them the big leaf varieties, small leaf varieties, and medium leaf varieties. The big leaf varieties, obviously Pu'er is a good example. Some of the white tea are big leaf varieties as well. Little veggie teas is not, but the Chinese tea number 1, Chinese tea number 2, usually known as the Fuding Dabai and Fuding Dahao, they're big leaf varieties. Houkui is a big leaf variety called Shida. And then this small leaf variety usually are used to make green teas and some of the famous red teas as well. Usually when we go north in the tea country, it's you have more small leaf varieties, and in the south you have more big leaf varieties. And medium leaf varieties are almost a staple variety for most oolong. We haven't got to that region yet, so let's first talk about small leaf variety. The classification on these varieties just kind of give us like a rough view. It's not very strict. In general, the rule is that if it's about this size, this is a mature leaf. So if the mature leaf is about the length of my thumb, this is a small leaf variety. So you can use your thumb as well, but basically it's just a rough measurement. And if it's basically the length kind of my middle finger, but I'm not gonna give you my middle finger, so then that's about the if the mature leaf, never the bud, but the mature leaf is about the size of my middle finger, then that's a medium leaf variety. And we saw in the Pu'er region, if the size is about the mature leaf is the size of my hand or my palm, that's a big leaf variety. Wait, palm and hand is not the same. So about the length of my hand, I guess. Now, another very important idea in Chinese tea is basically the locations, right? You can call them the terroir, just such as wine for wine. So there are many different factors contributing to that. Usually, you have the above the ground factors and the below the ground factors. So the microclimate is definitely very, very important. You see how foggy it is. So tea prefers direct sunlight, but not he prefers lots of sunlight, but you do not want direct sunlight. You do not want the sun to hit the tea directly. Usually northeast southeast direction is the most preferred. Dispersed sunlight is the best. So if the tea is basically facing where the sun comes in, but there's some media to disperse the sunlight, that would be the best. The most common thing we see is fog. Sometimes you can also use the shield of other trees' canopy as a filter. In case of cliff tea, sometimes it's the valley. They say the sun bounces off from the cliffs that comes out down to the tea. Even in the classics of tea, which was written about in like the 700 AD. So even in that book, the author Lu Yu has indicated what kind of soil is the best for tea. And basically, you want a very, very stony terrain. So you can see behind me how stony this is. Once we enter all these historical regions, you're gonna see that so many things match with what the ancient books talk about. What gives you the best tea? It's usually very, very foggy. The tea is among other trees, and it comes from very rocky terrain. It's very, very steep. You do want the tea to be on a slope. The number one terrain would be the what they call the stony terrain, so the rotten stone. That's the best for tea. You can definitely see the rotten stone here, and obviously, you have some the teas that basically is named after the rocky terrain it has. And we also the second best would be the sandy soil, and the basically rich soil is the worst. That's why we do not want a plantation teas. And the worst is actually there are a lot of regions now will convert rice field to tea fields. Now, rice and tea basically wants the exact opposite of a soil. So rice field converted teas are really, really bad. Another thing I want to talk about is the elevation. So over here is not that high. It's about 515. It's considered pretty high in this region. And remember where we're at the Longjing area, it was only like a 200 something. And below China is that much higher. The Jinshan Yinjin, China's most expensive tea, is even lower. So elevation is a sort of a myth. Uh, the reason being, you had to understand why elevation matters. So for all teas, you're basically looking for the same kind of microclimate, and so whatever usually what the pattern you see is that the more north a tea region is, the lower the elevation where the teas are produced, and the more south the tea region is, like in Yunnan, in Wuliangshan we see the tea as high as from 2,000 meters, so that's like 6,000 miles, and so those are the places that but however, their tea sells so much cheaper in comparison to the teas in this region. Basically, it's because you're looking for the same kind of microclimate, and you can either achieve it by the oh damn, is it longitude or longitude? But you know what I mean, the horizontal lines on the on the map. So you're either more north, basically, or you achieve the same kind of microclimate by going higher elevation, which usually you see in the more southern mountains. So eventually, you want to balance and the same, and it'll become the same. Huang Shan is definitely one of the colder tea regions. So in terms of just the microclimate, it's definitely one of the best. You can see my friend going behind me. He's wearing a down jacket. So, but once I moved to the Oolong region, obviously, it's gonna be a month later. However, even though some of the elevation will be higher, but it's actually much warmer. Right now, we're going to a different lot of tea field in Huangshan, and also look for some wild tea to see if they're ready to be picked. Look at this. Oh, it's a dried yam for snack. It's because we're not gonna come back for lunch. I just want to show you how this 2-year-old strap on him. That's actually his brother's son. And look at this kid. That's like his little resting area, because no one is in the household to take care of him. Right now it's the peak of tea season because it rained yesterday, so right now the tea is gonna bud like crazy, so everybody's busy picking tea. He has to come. Nobody can stay at home to take care of him, so he has to come to the tea field. This is amazing. This kid is 1 year and 7 months old. Remember yesterday he was using chopsticks and offered me food? Today he's picking tea. He's a genius of some sort. And he knows to pick a tender one. He barely can talk. So Mao Feng right now basically means a tea does not involve a step where you're making the shape. So you just kind of let the tea free curl and takes on a free shape. And usually the more tender the tea is, the more curl up it becomes. So sometimes people will say like a red Mao Feng. So basically it's a red tea that also does not involve a shape making. Because usually the traditional teas or historical teas kind of involve some kind of shape making, right? So if you have a spiral shape, people will call it, by the way, that's a batch of tea made in baking. We're going to show that, talk about that just in a second. If the tea is flattened, you call it longjing, right? And if the tea is straightened, you call it maojian. And if the tea just kind of takes on a free shape, you call it Mao Feng. So the very first step in making Mao Feng is just like green tea. Any other green tea, basically you want to stir fry it. Now Mao Feng, so there are, I guess, a mini lesson again. So there are actually 4 categories of subcategories of green tea. You have the stir fry green tea, baked dry green tea, steamed green tea, and then sun dried green tea. The definition is actually a little not very strict, because even if it's a baked dry green tea, you still need to stir fry it first. However, then you finish it by baking it. Versus a stir fry green tea, which is similar to like a longjing or biluochen, you finish the whole thing within the wok. And the steamed green tea will be similar to like an enshi yulu. It's very influential to the Japanese green tea because it's one of the oldest methods of making green tea. Back in Tang in Song Dynasty, most of the green teas are all steamed green teas. It's not basically until Ming Dynasty that the other forms of green tea start to come about. And the sun-dried green tea, the very important one, was actually from Yunnan. So a pu'er, if you overcook it, you can become a sun-dried green tea. And even nowadays, it's still many people still classify this raw pu'er as a sun-dried green tea because you finish off by sun-drying it. Now, so after the tea is being stir-fried, the reason for stir-frying the tea is to basically use high temperature to kill all the enzymes in the tea. 哎，怎么了? Oh, it was a bug. And then so, he was shaking the tea to let the dust come off a little bit. And so this is kind of like how do I say? It's a very simple version of a baking machine, you can call it, but it's not really a machine because on the very bottom, 我把这个打开一下，这个炭盆这个没事吧？ Okay, so you can see there's actually a charcoal bowl inside. I have to close it fast because I don't want it to lose heat. And then all the teas are put in this wooden trays, but on the bottom, the lining is actually just a synthetic material. The most of traditional way of making Mao Feng, the baking step, however, is done this way. So all of our tea is required to be baked this way. So you can see this put on a bamboo tray. Bamboo is heavily involved in all tea makings. and many people believe that it actually not only works well with the tea, but also give tea that some of the unique flavors that you cannot find in the machine-involved tea making. So on the bottom, under this tray, there's also a charcoal bean. This is actually a very skilled step, by the way. I've tried it numerous times, but to be able to basically just siphon out the bitsy part without let anything else fall is really, really hard. You can see on the floor, these are all the bits that you do not want. Now, Mao Feng, as a historical Korean tea, is very, very strict about the picking grade. So a lot of these leaves you can see is super tiny, and you can still consider it almost as a good leaf, but it's no longer good enough for Mao Feng. She was telling me those are not good. You don't want it. And usually you do not want to just kind of touch the tray while it's on a charcoal bean, because the number one big no-no during green tea making is the smoky flavor. However, so the charcoal bowl underneath is very, very dim, and it's basically just charcoal ash. And if you touch the tea and some tea fell on the fire, whatever, and then it'll actually create a layer of smoke, and it's not good. 是啊，你要炒茶吗？ She's grown so much. By the way, I've known her since she was born, basically. Hey,